The Queen of Granada, by M. Z. Riffi. The book. One Saturday morning, Rita was at the library with Nuria. When they arrived at their usual table, the black cat Espanto was already sitting there and waiting for them. Nuria could also see the deceased Grandma Nara sitting there. Rita felt it smelled so pleasant of rose water when Nara was present. She asked Nuria to ask Nara how to overcome fear of skeletons. Nuria exchanged a few words with Nara and said, "You should see the fear in the eyes before it turns into a limitation." To Rita, it sounded as if she had to crawl down into the catacombs and look the skeletons in the eye sockets as they walked among the bookshelves. Rita looked at the titles of the books to see if she could spot a book about the catacombs, but there was none. They went down to the department of children's books to borrow some books to Nuria. Rita took the opportunity and asked a female librarian if they had any books on the catacombs. The librarian looked strangely at her above the reading glasses and answered in a stressing tone, "Unfortunately not. We definitely do not have any books on the catacombs in this department. You can probably find them in religion history section." Nuria, who was curiously listening to their conversation, was annoyed by the arrogant response of the woman. She said in a forceful tone, "I want a book on carter bombs." She kept repeating it as they walked between the bookshelves from one section to another. Finally, from a distance, Rita spotted the sign of the religion history section in an elderly female librarian who stood behind the desk. The woman was already aware that Rita and Nuria were underway. Nuria dragged her favorite pink rubber boots on the ground and produced typical sound that disturbed the library's sacred silence. When Rita and Nuria finally stood in front of the desk, Rita looked at the librarian and said, "I would like to ask if you have any books on the catacombs." The librarian cast a long look at her and afterwards at Nuria and asked, "Occasionally, a black cat runs around in here. Is that yours?" Nuria looked around to see if Espanto was nearby, but he wasn't. The woman removed her reading glasses and, as if she were trying to protect their secret with the cat, she added in a whisper, "The other day, I saw with my own eyes, when you were talking to Marisol." She continued in a whisper, "Although I am not superstitious, I do believe that the black cat brought bad luck on that poor girl, Marisol. The same day as she spoke to you, her school internship was terminated with an immediate effect and the library ceased to offer internships to school children. I guess people in power in this country feel that it could be dangerous to let children come too close to the books." Then she threw a curious glance at Rita and asked, "I can hear from your Spanish that you are a foreigner. Where are you from, if I may ask?" Rita answered, "From Denmark." The woman reflected on it and said, Denmark." She added, "It has always amazed me how a democratic country like Denmark can have close diplomatic relations with the dictatorship in Spain." As a barely 16-year-old girl, Rita couldn't be held responsible for Denmark's diplomatic relations with other countries. She was about to respond that the woman should rather put the question to the international authorities, but she didn't. Nuria, who had lost patience, asked, "Do you have a book on carter bombs?" The librarian looked at her and said, "We have some books on catacombs over there. Follow me, please." As she walked in front of them, she turned, looked at Rita and said in a whisper, "I am old and I have reached the retirement age. Your generation is soon going to take over this world. Don't let the men steal the power from you." The last part could easily come from Rita's aunt in Copenhagen. The woman's gait was also just as wobbly as the aunt's, when she crisscrossing went before them between the shelves. Nuria made a persistent effort to keep pace with the adults. Although she raised her feet as high as she could still not avoid dragging her rubber boots across the floor. She hated it when the adults talked over her head and pretended she didn't exist. She pulled Rita's little finger, which she was firmly squeezing in her little hand, and asked, "Why is she whispering?" Before Rita had answered the question, the woman turned around and said in a whisper, "In a dictatorship-ruled country, people whisper to survive." Nuria responded in a whisper, "Okay." The little girl was obviously not satisfied with the woman's answer. After a few steps she said loudly, "But we never whisper in the kindergarten. We shout as loud as we can." The woman turned, looked at Nuria's eyebrows that she had raised in protest and said with a smile and without lowering her voice, "That sounds promising." In Rita's ears it sounded too optimistic that a librarian in the retirement age, a school-tired teenager, a little girl from the kindergarten, a black cat and an invisible grandmother in the background should be able to form a united front against a military dictatorship. But on the other hand, one could never know when a butterfly was able to flap its wings and set off a storm. Eventually the woman stopped at a bookcase, pointed to the lower shelves and said, "There they are." She took a book with a picture of the Eiffel Tower on its cover and said, "Here we have a book about the catacombs beneath Paris, and they are more than 300 kilometers long." While she flipped the book for Rita, she looked at Nuria and said, "The time I was your age, I was visiting Paris with my parents. We went down into the catacombs and I was lost. It was completely pitch dark everywhere and they couldn't find me. Eventually, I spotted the shining eyes of a black cat in the dark that led me to the exit." She asked Nuria, "What do you call your black cat?" Without considering that the woman would try to entice her to confirm that it was their cat that went around in the library, Nuria said promptly, "Espanto." Then she looked apologetically at Rita and pressed both hands to her mouth. She was though pleased that she had kept the secret of the grandmother Nara, who actually lived in the library. The woman repeated, "Espanto. You call your cat Espanto? A ghost?" Ghost is a very appropriate name for a black cat. There must be something about it when people claim that black cats move about in the world of spirits. She winked at Nuria and added in a whisper, "I'll keep your secret." She turned around and went back to her writing desk. Rita threw a fleeting glance through the books on the subject on the shelves. There were some books on the catacombs underneath Rome, Paris and other cities, but none on the catacombs underneath Granada. On the way home Nuria was uninterruptedly singing, "Carter bombs, Carter bombs." When they got home she told Rosen, "Mom, I want Carter bombs for my birthday." The mother looked first at Rita and then at Nuria and said, "It is not called a Carter bomb. It's a choco bomb. It is a chocolate ball filled with hard candies." The girl replied, "Then I want choco bombs for my birthday." The mother responded, "I'll remember it for your birthday." Rita was impressed by how sensitively Rosen managed to stop Nuria's Carter bomb rhyme that sounded like a scratch in the record. Otherwise, the girl would continue repeating it everywhere for several days. Later in the evening, after they had put Nuria to bed, they returned to the kitchen. Roseanne looked at Rita and said, "They think in the kindergarten that everyone in this house is possessed by the devil and that I am exposing the children to voodoo." Rita responded in an apologetic tone, "I asked the librarian if they had a book on catacombs." Nuria's ears picked it up and she would not let go. Rosen said, "If you are looking for a book about the catacombs underneath Granada, you should rather go to the bookstore behind the bazaar. The owner is a blind man. You should probably tell him that I have sent you, otherwise, you can return empty-handed." She added, "But if you climb on your own down there, you should make sure to take some spare batteries with you. You should also remember to take a few balls of yarn in order to use them as lifeline. Otherwise you risk getting lost in the dark and being found again after several hundred years."